With just 64 days to go until the midterm elections, allies of Donald Trump are actively trying to kick thousands of Georgians off of the voter rolls. Reporting from Bloomberg shows the conservative group Voter GA is challenging the eligibility of more than 37,000 voters in Gwinnett County, a once solidly Republican part of suburban Atlanta that has voted Democratic since 2016. The group is funded by Overstock founder / Trump superfan Patrick Byrne and Trump's former national security advisor, QAnon pledged devotee Michael Flynn, who you may remember twice pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. Georgia, of course, was ground zero in Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. These challenges would not only make it more difficult for scores of registered voters to cast a ballot, but also would place an even heavier burden on the already strained state elections officials. Joining me now is State Representative Bee Nguyen, the Democratic nominee for Georgia Secretary of State. And thank you for being here, Representative Nguyen. This is frightening. 37,000 voters challenged. It's also weirdly familiar because I do recall that Brian Kemp, when he was Secretary of State, did something quite similar, challenging more than 30,000 voters to sneak to victory as governor. Is this the same playbook or something different?
Thanks for having me on, Joy. And you bring up a really good point. This is not new in the state of Georgia, the attempts to influence the rules on who can show up and who can't show up to an election. And so we know under Secretary of State Kemp and Secretary of State Raffensperger, hundreds of thousands of voters have been purged off of our voter rolls, and in many cases erroneously. And we also know it impacts Black voters at a greater rate than any other voter. And if you remember in 2021, right before the 2 U.S. Senate runoffs, another Trump allied group, True the Vote, came in and challenged the eligibility of 364,000 voters in the state of Georgia. Republicans responded in 2021 by passing Senate Bill 202, the 98-page bill that now enables anybody to en masse systemically challenge hundreds of thousands of voters all across Georgia, going to our local election boards and putting that burden on our local election boards and requiring a hearing within 10 days of those complaints being filed.
When this bill was called Jim Crow 2.0, Republicans howled. And yet this is literally Jim Crow. This is literally taking somebody who took the time to register to vote, challenging them and making them justify being on the rolls. Let me read a little bit from this Bloomberg story. Georgia law allows the state, as you said, to take over elections boards if it finds them incompetent. Many clerks are worried that if they don't do a quick vetting of these mass challenges or the challenges lead to longer lines on election day, they will face a state takeover. One more bit. The Gwinnett challenges bring the total this election cycle to about 65,000, due largely to a 2021 overhaul of Georgia voting laws enacted in response to unfounded allegations of widespread fraud in 2020. The law effectively encouraged these mass challenges, as you just said. This sounds like more than the margin by which Kemp won as governor. And so I wonder, are you concerned that because these mass challenges are now legal, perfectly legal under this law, that essentially Kemp is going to be, because of Trump allies, they're going to be able to use subtraction to win? And that includes Herschel Walker.
Right. We're looking at a state in Georgia where in 2020, the margin was 11,780 votes. And so all of these laws are intended to cut away at that margin. And when you're looking at these massive voter challenges taking place all across Georgia, with no guidance from the Secretary of State's office, these local election boards, they're scrambling, talking to their county attorneys, making sure that they are following the law, and they are in fear of being taken over if they feel like they're not following the law as prescribed. What they've essentially done is they've done a workaround around the federal voting rights protection that does not allow mass purging 90 days before an election. And they're doing it, as you said, with just 7-8 weeks before a major election cycle. And so what they have done is they've created new laws to try and prevent people from showing up because they know the margins in Georgia are going to be close.
What can voters do? Are they notified that they're being purged? Do people even know before they show up to vote? You're running for Secretary of State. What would you advise Georgia voters to do today?
Check your voter registration and check it often. If you are being targeted like these voters have in Gwinnett County, that 37,500 voters in Gwinnett County, you will receive a letter in the mail. What I'm also concerned about is when you look at a county like Gwinnett, it is extremely diverse. It is a population of Black voters, Asian voters, and Latino voters. And oftentimes these notices, they are sent in English only. So this is an all hands on deck moment in which you've got to check your voter registration. If you get anything in the mail, you've got to call voter protection and make sure you're taking all the right steps to make sure that when you show up in November, you can actually vote. We are a state that does not allow same-day voter registration. So if you are removed from the rolls after October 11th, you will not be able to vote in Georgia.
Can the Department of Justice, I know when Eric Holder was Attorney General, they were suing states for doing stuff like this. Any word from the DOJ?
Well, I know that there is litigation pending around this very same provision, specifically litigation that came to light right after True the Vote came in and tried to those 364,000 voters. And according to federal law, you cannot systematically remove large numbers of voter within the 90-day blackout period. So I believe that we will see litigation move forward given the federal protections that we have in place. But again, in a state like Georgia, where it's this close to an election, and so that litigation, the results of that is probably not going to be before this November election.
And it is not coincidental that the ticket, the Democrats who are running are yourself, Representative Bede Nguyen is running for Secretary of State, Stacey Abrams running for governor, who, as you said, came within a hair of Brian Kemp when he became governor after purging more than 30, I think it was something like 35,000 people from the rolls. And of course, Senator Raphael Warnock, who's running against Herschel Walker. How concerned are you that this will not be a free and fair election?
Well, I'm very concerned, not just from the standpoint of these voter eligibility challenges, right? So we're looking again at a state with a very slim margin, and that 98-page voter suppression bill, it does take away a voter's ability to use pure drop boxes that we saw helped voters' ballots get in time. And it does also chop away at the time period in which a voter can request and receive an application to vote by mail. And we have seen the rejection rates increase on the application side. And when the voter actually receives the ballot in hand, we've seen the rejection rate increase as well. And then we're also looking at these inane provisions like criminalizing handing out a bottle of water to a voter waiting in line in a state like Georgia, where people had to wait up to 11 hours in 2020. And then we've got this new rule about having to vote in your precinct on election day, even if you are in the correct county. You are no longer able to vote by provisional ballot. So it's all of those things added together that creates a situation in Georgia where there's voter intimidation, voter suppression, and voter subversion. And we know that all of those things are going to add up. So we, on the other side of the aisle, Democrats, we know we have to out-organize. We know we have to turn out our voters like we've never turned them out before, because we've got to make up for these little margins here and there because of these new voting laws in place.
This is Jim Crow, period. It just is. Georgia State Representative, Secretary of State candidate Bede Nguyen, thank you so much for being here and alerting us to this. We're going to send this, we're going to post this on our social media so you guys can share it with all of your friends and family in Georgia, because folks need to know what to do. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you being here.